No intro? Maybe not. Okay.
I saw it.
You saw it? I didn't. Oh, well. Welcome into episode 256 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR podcast network. Sources Say is, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations. It's on Blazer Parkway and Wellington Way by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling 859-543-0700. You can even send a text message to one of their friendly team members at the same number to ask a question or make an appointment. Now is a great time to schedule your dental cleaning. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team strive to provide you with good oral health in a comfortable environment. The Justice Dental team looks forward to seeing you soon. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined once again in a non-car setting for Sean Smith. Sean, how the heck are you, buddy?
I'm fantastic. I'm not sitting on the side of the road, and I'm not sitting in my car trying to borrow internet from somewhere. I'm no longer mobile, and I'm settled in, and life is slowing down a little bit.
Oh, Mark Maggard says I look better when I was using a potato for a Wi-Fi router. It is what it is. But yeah, you're in Lexington, and we got some big news coming at some point, not ready to be announced quite yet, but you are now officially stationed. And I guess we could say that you're coaching. You are now going to be coaching in Lexington, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
No behind the scenes. Like you don't get anything beyond just Sean Smith will be coaching in Lexington, Kentucky. What level that means, we will see.
Yeah. Sooner. It's coming. Like I'll be able to actually say something. Hopefully by the end of the week, I'll be able to at least tell where I'm going to be at. But it is a big move for me. It's a move up to high school basketball at a program that I'm really excited to be a part of, and a lot of good stuff. And really, really excited to see what is next for me in my coaching future, and to hopefully try to win a state championship.
Oh, I like the hint there. Well, what a 24 hours. I guess the whole week has been pretty fascinating, but yesterday in particular, and there were a couple people that were joking on the circumstances behind the BBN podcast that KSR is pulling a round ball move, delaying the hell out of this. So I don't know if, Sean, you got around. I'm assuming that you got around to watching the absolute nonsense that was the Hunter Dickinson announcement. Not really an announcement, kind of sort of commitment, but not really committing to anything type deal. Holy crap, what an absolute disaster that was. Tough listen. Just being totally transparent, man. I really struggled to get through that one, and it was 37 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Yeah, it sure was something, Sean. Didn't learn really that much that we didn't know already going into that show. And that was kind of like the tagline to close things out. They were like, oh, man, everybody's going to be so pissed that they spent all this time and didn't learn anything else. Ha, 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 we got them. And I'm like, well, kind of interesting business model to go off of, to just kind of like make fun of people for wasting their time. But oh, well, that's not my thing. What did you learn from the Hunter Dickinson experience on what day was that? Tuesday, whatever it was. Yeah, Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, I learned to not overanalyze John Calipari's tweets, and to never assume that you're going to get some groundbreaking news when a podcast is put out. I actually didn't even tune in because I already kind of knew. I just was like, there's nothing is coming from this other than an update on where things are and visits, and I enjoyed this, I enjoyed that, and things like that. But no, we got absolutely nothing out of it, right? They got some really good ratings and probably a lot of downloads out of it, but other than that, not a whole lot. We're still kind of in the same ballpark as what we were. It's a guessing game at this point with Hunter.
And I guess it was, refreshing for him to, and I think there was some real emotion with this when he said, I just don't know. Like I'm really, really struggling with this decision. And he said, I think some of the more revealing comments that he said is any of my four options. So 4 being everybody but Georgetown that he was considering before, Kentucky, Kansas, Maryland, Villanova. He unofficially cut Georgetown. I had heard earlier in the day that Georgetown was told that they were no longer being considered. So we're at least getting some type of progress being made with this. But he said, I could see myself fitting in at any of those 4 options. And he said, it's kind of what makes the decision so difficult, because I do see a fit at all 4 places. You know, he could go to Maryland and be a superstar. He could go to Villanova and, you know, kind of that, are they growing to be blue blood status? You know, Kyle Neptune, new coach, and, you know, culture being built there. Like there's some intrigue there. It's close to home, 2 hours away. Kansas and Kentucky, the 2 blue bloods. Like I was told going into this process that he really valued, you know, he was kind of trying to weigh, do I want to play for a blue blood and win a national championship versus make a ton of NIL money staying close to home? Like those were the 2 kind of weighing factors in his mind. And if one of those 2 options, Kansas, could provide both of those, that it would make sense fit wise. So that's why going into this, I guess yesterday, I had this mindset of, I'd heard some things behind the scenes about Kansas and its lack of shyness regarding its confidence and just kind of spouting off about, you know, we're going to match whatever offers out there for him, and we're confident where things stands. All the other coaching staffs involved, just knowing what I know, they liked where things stood, but none of them carried the kind of arrogance that Kansas carried with it. And I was told that they were doing some pretty serious negative recruiting, especially toward Kentucky. I think they saw Kentucky as their biggest, knowing that he liked the blue blood pitch and playing for a title contender, that they were actively negatively recruiting against Kentucky. And Kentucky just kind of had some stuff to battle against. And just being totally transparent, I was told that Hunter's family loved the facilities and just kind of the upgrades that Kansas had underwent. And, you know, they kind of had the traditional feel and the historic aspect, but also a sense of, you know, real modernism. Like they were really impressed with the upgrades and just how updated everything looked. And unfortunately, they just didn't get that feel at Kentucky. I will say they did like at Kentucky the strength and conditioning program, the player development coach that Hunter kind of slid in there that is being added to the staff. And I'll talk about that in a second. But it was kind of the first time that I'd heard some, you know, pretty significant, like Kansas was kind of night and day facility wise versus Kentucky. And I think that's something that has to get addressed, whether Kentucky gets Hunter or not. Like, you can't just have recruits openly saying, like we saw with Trae Young back in the day, like you can't have recruits openly saying that the facilities just weren't good enough at Kentucky.
Yeah, and that's something, like you said, that has to get addressed, which kind of feeds into John Calipari's thing about a practice facility, right? Like that's the reason Cal has been pushing that for a while now. But yeah, this is a tough decision for Hunter, and when it comes not just to NIL but fit and role and how things play out. And here it is, we are now officially into May. So we would, like, I keep doing this whole time frame of when the roster should be set and when we should know, and I kept setting it at middle May. And I mean, I still think that we're trending towards that and having an idea of what Kentucky's roster will look like. But this is a big decision that impacts Kentucky's future, because we still have no idea what's going to happen with Oscar Tshiebwe. We have no idea where that situation is going to be. If Kentucky misses on both, where does Kentucky go? Like those are all things that we don't have to discuss at this point, but we could here in a week or so. But I think it was big that, you know, you mentioned the strength and conditioning coach and those things. Like those were the key things to get him to campus to see the other things that he hadn't got to see in the past. So I thought that was big to hear that from him and stuff. But you got to address the facilities. Like if it's coming out of this and you got this caliber of a recruit on campus or this caliber of a transfer, and you find out that somebody else's facilities are better than yours, that is instant needs to be fixed, because that's not just any program. That's an elite blue blood program in college basketball that you were trying to compete against in recruiting and everything else in the country.
And when you know that they're negatively recruiting against you, and you know that, you know, just talking about what they were talking, you know, they had roster concerns about Hunter going to Kentucky and saying that there's not a clear fit there. Also had some coaching concerns and, you know, just player relationships and things that Hunter really values. Said, talking to people, you know, people that we trust and know, you're not going to get that at Kentucky compared to what you're going to get here at Kansas. They were already going in at a disadvantage, not disadvantage, but having to answer and address concerns on Hunter's side because of some negative recruiting tactics on Kansas' side. if you're already going to have that on a short visit, he already mentioned that the visit was only like 24 hours. You don't need to add on a disadvantage with facility upgrades and having to kind of throw that in. And it's not night and day. Look, he's going to be there for 1 year. He has 2 years of eligibility, but I think this is going to be a one-stop situation. So facilities will not be done by the time Hunter's on campus anyway. So it's not really the point. And he's not going to make a decision solely based on that, but it's a big picture issue that I have personally. Well, that there's no excuse for that to be kind of a week later, things kind of marinating a little bit. Like, I'm really kind of shocked at how old and tired was the exact quote that I got on Kentucky stuff. Like, you're Kentucky, man. Like that has to get figured out.
Well, and that's the thing here, right? So when we're talking about the facilities, like let's say you agree that it's not going to have the final say all when it comes to where Hunter Dickinson plays college basketball next season. Like we know that it's going to come down to more NIL fit, things like that. But if that, you have to think John Calipari's probably like, see, I told you so a little bit to maybe Mitch and some others, like, hey, we've got to update these things. And when you have a kid of that caliber saying it, John Calipari's probably right now thinking, okay, what can we do to make this better ASAP? Because like you said, you can't have a school that's negatively recruiting against you with your on-court stuff be able to negatively recruit against you with your facilities and the other things as well. And if Kansas is going to do it or whoever, everybody else is going to latch onto it as well. And that's part of today's recruiting world is what are your facilities? How modern are they? And something that was updated 6 years ago probably almost needs to have something updated to it again. That's just the age that we live in.
And it doesn't need to be a $10 million upgrade, no. A whole new product. But just keep one new thing here. Like just keep adding even if it's and I know they're doing the NBA player stuff, and like just put a new fat head up every once in a while. Put a new statue of it doesn't have to be this multi-million-dollar big picture blueprint plan. Like just keep adding the freshness and the appeal to keep that the swagger aspect of Kentucky at an all-time high where it needs to be. I mean, this is a program deserving of that gold standard stuff, and that's not a gold standard pitch coming out of that visit. So
it's not. And I guess the one positive to maybe to not be concerned about it is Kentucky did land DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, #1 recruiting class with facilities that they have. Like the facilities aren't going to be, to me, the determining factor of where Kentucky's going to slide in recruiting, but you still want to be, if you are the gold standard and you claim to be, you still want to be the gold standard in every category and every area you can be. And facilities is one of those areas. And we know that Kentucky needs an update.
So on the player development guy, as Hunter spilled the beans on, and we'd named this guy on this show in the past, John Welch, a longtime NBA assistant, father of Riley Welch, a guy who's been in the NBA since 2003. I mean, that's almost 2 decades worth of experience in the league. I've heard amazing things about X's and O's, scouting, like it's something that was a very, very clear downside to this past season and the current coaching staff. It was missing. I mean, I was told that he would be taking on that John Robick role, and that guy has been missing on this staff for several years now. And I love the decision to add him in that capacity. And the fact that hearing a player of Hunter's caliber leave a visit because they were on the visit, like in Lexington together. And it was cool that overlap was able to happen. Yeah. It was cool seeing kind of the, Hunter singling that out specifically, because he brought up on the podcast last time that he wanted to see the strength and conditioning program, Brady Welsh, and just what that had to do, because that's a new addition since Hunter first took an unofficial visit back in high school. It was cool hearing him address that head on and say, it was everything I'd hoped it would be. But to single out the player development guy, John Welch, is, a reason for interest in Kentucky. It's exactly what you want to hear. And I do think that that's going to be something that could be, I don't know the exact role, like name. Like I think it's just going to be like player development, special assistant with player development or something like that. I don't know, but I do think that that's going to come down the pike at some point in the near future, and I think it's a huge addition.
And we talked last week about how those two visits or whatever were kind of overlapping, and it was an unfortunate thing. It actually ended up being a positive thing, right? Like when you get the name, you get it mentioned and talked about. So we know that that's an important thing. And I'm with you. I think it's a great move by Cal. I think it's a great move by Kentucky to add that to its staff. And we've talked a lot about not just roster construction stuff this offseason, but we've talked a ton about the needs on the staff and what needs to be addressed and what needs to be added and things like that. And I've always been of the belief that you can't have too many guys. You can't have too many boots on the ground, especially when it comes to leading a program like the University of Kentucky. You need guys in roles. Not everybody needs to be doing – somebody doesn't need to be doing two or three things. You get somebody to do that one thing. That way the other people can focus on what they're elite at and what they're best at. And I think that this is a great move for the program.
And that leads to my next – that's good news. But that also leads to my next concern about the staff and the lack of movement to name an assistant in replacement of KT Turner. Cal has been vetting quite a bit and has liked some of the options and has gotten deep in conversations with some of these options. And, we've talked about some of the names floating around, ranging from the grassroots circuit to other high major assistants to the NBA ranks. I mean, he's been trying, Josh Pastner, former head coach. He has been kind of trying to hit all different areas. And I even had a new name come through, not allowed to share the name quite yet, but it's an AAC coach that kind of an under the radar guy that it would be an absolute home run, had things, and could, still technically on the table, but just not a lot of traction here. And it sucks because I think we're already 2 evaluation periods through with the recruiting season. You only have 2 more. And the latest I've heard is that we might see the current trio of assistants right now just kind of finish out the summer and kind of just not focus on that right now because there's so much other stuff going on with, recruiting and transfer portal and, looking ahead to 2025 and 2026. And there's just so much on the table. And I just don't know if I agree with that mindset. Like I think Bruiser Flint has a role on this staff, but to just leave him in as the third guy when you have 2 other spots to fill on the staff now that you can have 5, like I think that's a little bit too comfortable, I think. And I think I'd heard Cal was trying to get creative, and even though he hasn't found anybody that he's really, really fallen in love with and like I got to go sign that guy. Like, I think he's got to keep working at that. I think he can't just get content with those 3 guys and say, we're already almost through the summer. Might as well just pack up and take the guys we have right now. Like, I think Cal needs to keep digging and finding that guy. But as of right now, there's not really a whole lot of movement.
The live periods, and I think the next one, I know Nike has theirs in Dallas, the 12th or the 14th, and then Memphis. And I plan on being at the one in Memphis for other reasons other than just working. But those are, I agree with you. I think that getting your full staff and stuff there and everything and being able to evaluate and recruiting, and then you got Peach Jam will be the next one when it gets to that point. But Kentucky's staff will be in place by then because they play around that same time. That's a big July coming up. But I'm with you. I think that you need to have all your faces kind of out there and rolling right now to kind of get not really putting a wrap on what's going on with this class. Like, that's done. Like, we know that whoever comes in isn't going to have an impact on whether Hunter Dickinson transfers to Kentucky or not. Like, that's not going to be where it starts. But getting moving with this next class, having your staff in place for recruiting, having your staff in place for these workouts and stuff when these guys get on campus a month from now. That's what's hard to believe. Like, we're talking, we don't know what the roster is going to look like in 4 weeks. They're going to be arriving on campus to get started, to get ready for this summer. So I do think that it's something that needs to be addressed soon, because we've known that coaching vacancy has been there for almost 2 months now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting pretty close. Like you need to get somebody in place and get something there pretty quickly, in my opinion. Like you want to have this staff finalized around the same time you get your roster finalized, preferably.
In the third guy should have already been established. Like we should be on the 2 extra guys that Cal has, and like John Welch is one of those guys, and I love that decision, and I think it's a great one on Cal's part, but it shouldn't be looking at the secondary guys right now. Like he should be looking for that home run guy to fill that third spot. And it's weird because there was a name that came up that I was like, well, that would be, that would make a lot of sense, and I but it's exactly what I was looking for. And then just things kind of died down and, kind of poked at Kentucky. It was like, what have you heard about, this? And it's like, not a whole lot. It's very weird. Like that should have already been nailed down. And a part of it is just Cal hasn't fallen in love with anybody in particular. And I just think you gotta not settle. Like you gotta find somebody out there to, I like the scouting approach with John Welch, but I do think that we need to dive a little bit more into, if not, player relationships or, the X's and O's. I think recruiting is going to be just fine. So I don't know. We'll see how that unfolds, but not enough movement for my liking in that regard.
Do you think this is a move with the staff, with this assistant coach, that he adds an assistant coach that has a future as a possible head coach? Or do you think that this is an assistant coach that is maybe polished in that role, that has done well just as an assistant coach, that maybe has been a head coach in his past or at some point? What do you think is going to be kind of the final say with this? Do you think it's going to be a young guy that has aspirations of being a head coach, or do you think it's going to be maybe a guy that's kind of ingrained in his role as an assistant that's looking for just maybe a new opportunity, something at a place like Kentucky?
The name that came up last week that was new was a young guy, and it was a, not a full-time name brand type of kid, and that's why I was kind of excited by it. I was like, oh, I mean, it takes digging to find that name, so it's not like a Josh Pastner where it's like, oh, well, that duh, but that's kind of why I was intrigued by it, because it was like, damn, that takes a lot of vetting and a lot of digging to find that guy. So,
and we've been talking young guy, right? Like that's the thing that me and you've been talking about. Go get a young guy that is going to come in here and grind in that role, that is given a bigger plate than maybe what he's had in the past. And that's what I'm hoping it is.
And there's a lot of talk about Rondo. Gerald Minton says update on Rondo, and the BBN podcast says Rondo. He was taking full-time classes this past year, putting himself in position to be on the staff as a student assistant, a full-time student assistant, the exact same role that Tyler Eulis was in. I was told early on in the spring that those conversations were still ongoing, but there is a hiccup with his AAU program. They're trying to get that into like an EYBL program, and that'd be a clear conflict of interest. He would not be allowed to be on staff if he had his own AAU program on the EYBL circuit. So that's something they're trying to navigate right now. The fact that the conversations are still ongoing makes me feel good, but I don't know. Part of me is like, man, it sucks because Rondo is an established name, and he cares about his community and kids in Kentucky and Louisville, especially where he grew up. Like, do you spend 1 year on the Kentucky staff just for the sake of doing it as a student assistant, or to sacrifice kind of helping young kids find themselves as an AAU basketball player and trying to help them establish, kind of for the next generation? It's kind of one of those like selfish decisions versus, doing what's best for maybe his own personal gain as a coach, but also setting up the next generation of athletes. So it's kind of one of those, I'm less confident now about it unfolding the way it could because of that hurdle. But the fact that there's still conversations ongoing about it, and I think that there could be some other schools that try to step in and maybe throw similar offers or put him in a similar spot. Like I think it's going to be competitive. It's not just going to be a cut and dry type deal, but conversations had still been ongoing entering this offseason. So I wish there was better news and more concrete stuff about that, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast when you're dealing with a world champion NBA player who's known as one of the most brilliant minds in basketball.
Yeah, and we're kind of at that period here where we knew we would get to where there's news, but there's not a ton of news. Like there's not anything that we can come on here and say it's final. It's the last step. It's this. Like, you know, maybe for a brief moment we might have thought that we would have something on Hunter Dickinson official by now, but all we got was anticipation of a podcast that dropped at 4:30 and got nothing out of it besides John Calipari kind of making me think that it's like, okay, Cal put 4:00 in this tweet for a reason. Like that's intentional. But then come out and it's nothing. So we're in that in between here, Jack, where we have something but not what we want. But we know that pretty soon it's going to pick up a ton. And in every episode moving throughout the month is probably going to have some probably breaking news on it with something to do with this roster, whether it be players coming back, whether it be added players from the portal, players maybe making their final decision on their future, like an Oscar Tshiebwe. We still got to talk about what happens with that, the coaching staff. There's so much to still play out over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And I noticed a comment earlier talking about, you know, when are we going to have something on Adu and Lance? And Jack, I'm kind of the belief that nothing has to be said from Adu and Lance. Like
Lance posted a picture from the Joe Kraft Center today. It was with Lil Wayne. I mean, duh, he's going to post a picture of that. But he's there with Adu Thiero. And, you know, Damian Collins is even still – because they're wrapping up this spring semester. Like, I mean, you got to be on campus. But I think barring, you know, Ron Holland gets added to the roster and Oscar Tshiebwe comes back, you know, if there are just too many mouths to feed and Lance Ware is kind of looking at it like, man, there is not a single path for me to earn any playing time next season. I think that would change things. And Adu Thiero, kind of a similar situation. If, you know, Cal falls in love with fill in the blank, you know, Jordan Dingle or, you know, whatever. And I know Kentucky does have interest in him, but I think that's kind of like a just weighing what other options, what happens with Antonio Reeves, what happens with Chris Livingston, and kind of fitting him in somewhere there. But Adu wants a spot. Like Adu wants an opportunity, and I think that's totally fair. He was brought in to be a project guy, but you also can't pitch a project guy role and then never give him the opportunity to prove himself that he's developing. So it's kind of that happy it's kind of like as of right now, Adu is coming back. Like his dad told me the plan as of right now is to return to Kentucky. But if they add a couple new guys in the portal, obviously Adu would have to look at his different options. So it's just complicated with those two guys in particular. As of right now, I think they're both back, but it's still not as clear as it probably could be because of just what else is out there in the portal.
Yeah, and I guess what I was getting at is they could not say a word and then just be there at the end of the month or beginning of June when players move in on campus
Very
and
possible.
begin workouts. Like, you know, that's entirely possible too. And Adu is an intriguing piece. Like I know I said this maybe last week or the week before, but where Adu plays, I think, I don't know if it's set in stone at this point. Like, is he a guard with the ball in his hands? Is he going to make the transition to a forward if he continues to grow and add weight to his frame? Like, I think that his versatility and his frame is it gives him some flexibility when it comes to where he could slide in and find a role. I don't think he's pigeonholed into just being at one spot. And I think that maybe makes him probably one of the most intriguing guys that could be on this roster a year from now, because I could see him helping out at multiple positions depending on what happens with injuries, what happens with role and playing time and fit. And a guy that knows your system that's been here, I think that's important too. And I would love to see Adu Thiero stay on this roster, because I think that maybe not this coming season, but a year from now, we're going to be sitting here, if he's still on the UK roster, talking about, I think, a significant step forward as a junior.
Yeah, and did you see the new picture update that his dad put out of him? I mean, my God, that dude is an absolute tank. And I think that's kind of the fun thing. And I've said this on the show several times. That's the fun part about him and how the staff is kind of viewing him. It's like, man, how do you know what he's going to be until he's done growing? Like, he just, you know, look at him. He is a tank. He is Chris Livingston's body right now. You know, and we're talking about Chris Livingston being a small ball four and roll and all that stuff. And you have Adu Thiero, who came in as a 6'2" point guard, playing that, you know, majority of his career, to like now he's 6'7", 20. It's like
it's a later version of Anthony Davis's growth spurt is what it is. Like, obviously Anthony Davis went from point guard to what he is, and we're not calling a Duthero Anthony Davis, but I'm just saying it's rare that you get a guy on campus that his body changes the way that it has, not just in size with like weight, but like height. Like, I mean, this is a kid that's been growing since he got here. And that's where I think that he kind of has some options. Like, does he transition to more of a 3? If he keeps growing, does he play a small ball 4 role? I don't know. Like, I think that there's options there that he has that maybe some other guys don't have. And I think that that's why I hope they find a way to keep him in Lexington. I don't know what the role will be this year. I'm not expecting him to play a ton if he's on this roster, but I think if he stays committed to the process of this, that I think a junior season, you could be talking about a guy that's been in this program for 2 years, that's gone through a lot and played with a lot of talented players and gained some experience that could be a key guy that we're talking about in returning and adding experience to next year's team with a larger role.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what that role is going to be, just play style wise, because he's fun. Like, he's just really fun. And I know there's a lot of talk that he's really struggled in practice, and trusting him to play the way he had it at times in games. And like, there were times that it was rough. Like, he's not a polished product, and it's going to take a minute. Like, that's why he came in and why there was so much trust built up. So it's just, he is like the perfect case of like, man, he could be the next like big player development guy that Cal has, that you could kind of look long term. Like, man, that was a cool success story with him long term.
And we know that Cal doesn't just throw out scholarships. Like, how many times have fans complained in the past that he doesn't fill them all?
Every year.
I think, and me and you, when we first found out about Adu like a year or so ago, we were like, what is happening here? Is this a preferred walk-on? Is this just to maybe boost his recruitment and getting some interest from somewhere back home? No, they offered him a scholarship and he took it. That tells you that Cal sees something long-term project-wise commitment, because he's not going to just hand out a scholarship to a friend or a family friend or a former player's child. Like that's where I think Adu has a future in this program. It's just you hope that he doesn't feel the pressure to get out and find it immediately, because I do think that there is a spot for him in Lexington, whether that be in 23-24, but I think it's more so 24-25 is where his role is needed the most.
Andrew Bates says, seems like Chris is the reason they didn't go after Mbako. That Mbako is the reason why Kentucky didn't go after Mbako, and part of the reason why they were intrigued with Ron Holland. And I think that's more of just, they've been in love with Ron Holland ever since, like, I mean, they've been in love with him for a minute, but at FIBA's is really when staff was like, damn, dude, that he's just kind of a plug and play guy with anybody. Mbako, Cal never really loved, but loved the connection with DJ and Aaron. And I know there was a lot of talk about, just kind of fit wise, he kind of on paper seems like he'd be the perfect fit alongside, at that kind of what Chris Livingston was kind of, fans kind of hoped that he would be, at that maybe small ball 4, stretch 4 kind of guy. But they didn't win a whole lot. The Scholars didn't this past year. And to have 3 of those guys as the kind of anchors of your team, it's not, I think, not from, in my opinion, not something that I would personally want to explore. And I know he's a big name, but I think part of the emphasis on Ron was just like, man, he's a plug and play guy that would fit on any roster and really clear up a lot of any concerns and kind of solidify roles for me, especially where, Justin Edwards, I think, can slide over and be a 4 if necessary. I think he's definitely more of a 3, and he fits in that role pretty firmly. And I think having him alongside Ron Holland and then, Bradshaw or whoever you want at the 5, I mean, I think that would be the ideal role for me just on paper. But
if Ron were to end up at Kentucky, do you have any concerns about pieces that could possibly shift and go elsewhere if they add a guy like Ron? Like, is there any concern that someone could maybe look at that and think, okay, what is my role?
Yes, I do. And it's not like super like you don't have to do much digging to hear it either. It's something that Kentucky knows about and is addressing internally. And like, but it's something that has been a conversation, trying to navigate the Hunter stuff and Oscar coming back and all that. Like there does come a point where, with Ugo and you fight to bring him back, and there's a lot of excitement about him long term. And think of the process with Aaron Bradshaw getting him to commit to Kentucky. Think about he was going to commit in right after, he told me at MBPA Top 100 camp in Orlando that I know where I'm going. I'm really excited. Like let's get this done. And then there's this random 3-month stretch where he kind of has to take a step back and go, well, I really need to weigh my options a little bit more. And it was just, and he worded some things really weirdly, like, are you ready to make your commitment? And he said, I've chosen a college for right now. And somebody said, what about the pro route? Is that something that you're exploring? And he said, well, I'm going to make a college commitment right now. It's if there was somebody that would have something to say, I do think that it would be Aaron Bradshaw, and that's something that Kentucky would have to address. But you can't worry about that right now. Like you gotta fill out your roster as is right now, and then kind of navigate those waters as they come, I guess is the best way to put it. Understanding speculation and talk that's out there, while also moving forward and building the roster as it lays out currently. So it's complicated, but if there was one, that would be my personal concern. Were you going to say something? I didn't.
Well, I was just going to say that when you add a player, if you add a player of that caliber, it obviously it makes things at least complicated to some degree, especially this late. But, and we're talking about Ron Holland here. Like we're talking about like there's a lot of schools out there that would add Ron Holland to its roster right now. And but I don't know. I just wanted to ask you that and get your thoughts to see if you were concerned, because I obviously had my concerns as well. Because
that's a good question from Connor. Would you rather have Holland or Bradshaw?
Yeah, I was about to ask you the same thing because I saw that comment and Stephen put it up on the screen. I'll let you take that first. Is it one or the other, or is it?
I think that would probably be. I don't know. It just depends on if you strike out on both Hunter and Oscar. I don't think so, but exactly. I also think Kentucky will have one of those two on their roster. So it's just kind of there's a bunch of moving parts and trying to navigate that. But on paper, for what this team is going to do and fit wise, I think Ron Holland is the better fit. I do, and I think he is a plug and play guy. You don't have to kind of build around him. He's just kind of going to get his no matter what. And I think the fit is better there, but it's, I'm not going to complain about either. They're both top 10 talents in high school basketball.
And that's what I was about to say. It's not about who you want more over the other. It's about looking at fit and what Kentucky would have. And I do think that he would be a better fit for what fans want and what Kentucky wants to do. But both are extremely talented, and you'd love for there to be some way to have both. But if Hunter Dickinson or Oscar Tshiebwe is here, I don't see that happening. And I'm with you. I do think that one of those guys will be on Kentucky's roster at the 5. Like I think that's probably I feel safe in saying that I think that one of them will be. I don't know which one it will be, but I think that once Kentucky gets its 5 spot solidified, and I think it all comes down to, does Antonio Reeves announce his return to Kentucky? And I think that's really the main decision, is what Kentucky looks like on the interior at the 5 spot.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of the draft process. Workouts have started, and this is when, talking to Antonio's side, this is when they kind of said they would sit down and, they wanted to take this seriously and figure out what was next. And I think they understand that the money is going to be better back at Kentucky, and they understand that they do not want to be living in the G League. So that is definitely, I think, going to be the next big decision. I think we're right in the heat of that, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's kind of the next one to come down the pike. And they got a little quiet there for a second because they were pretty outspoken about I think coming back is going to be the best option. But I do think that they're really wanting to get to the bottom of this NBA stuff and just see what his future looks like. And weighing those options. But I do think that's going to unfold. But Oscar Tshiebwe is right in the middle of it too. I was told that he has a couple more workouts to sift through before reaching a final decision. And I don't know. It feels just on the outside looking in that Oscar, there has been some massaging that has needed to be done about just I don't know. It's touchy, but some massaging on Oscar and more so the people around him about what the expectations would be should he come back to Kentucky and all that. But I think there's kind of an understanding right now that the draft stock isn't great. Like I've talked to NBA scouts. They think that there's a role for him. He would have a niche, but he's not his upside's not super high. So it's just one of those deals that I think he knows that he would make more at Kentucky coming back to school. And I don't know, just outside reading the tea leaves, outside looking in, it feels like Kentucky is going to not get Hunter Dickinson and then kiss and make up with Oscar Tshiebwe and get him back for another year. Like that's just kind of me personally, my more so that's just more educated guess based on things that I've heard on both sides and how things are going with different schools and all that. But that's just kind of my vibe as of right now, that I think at the end of the day, Kentucky will, more likely to get Oscar back than getting Hunter, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And I agree with you on that one too. And I think we've known this for 3 or 4 weeks. Well, not really, maybe that long, but maybe when we started the intensity of Hunter Dickinson in Kentucky kind of picking up. And at first we didn't think there was much there. And then John Calipari flies there and meets with him, and then he sets up the visit, and then you start getting some legs to it. And when that started becoming a scenario, then we started kind of keying in saying it's going to be one of the two. And that's going to be Kentucky's kind of big move. Is it a new face or is it a familiar face? That's what it comes down to. And the rest of Kentucky's roster, I think, is pretty much set. Like you get Antonio Reeves back, and then I could see. Do you see them adding anything else if Oscar comes back? If it's just Oscar and Reeves, or do you see them going portal at another spot if Chris does indeed move on to the NBA draft? Like I'm starting to look at it and say that they don't. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I lean. It's tough because I think because there are so many moving parts, they've considered they've considered the possibility of Jordan Dingle. They've considered the possibility of adding, a stretch 4 kind of guy, but it's all kind of contingent on different things. So I think if you get Reeves back, you get Oscar back just for this. I think, and assuming Adu takes some type of jump, I think that might be it. And I think unless Jordan Dingle's dying to come, I don't know. It's complicated.
It is,
because you don't want to be caught empty-handed. Like you don't want to be caught hurting with depth, but you also don't want to deal with more mouths to feed and egos and stuff like that. Like it's a really this is a really tough offseason for Cal. Really tough
honestly,
to navigate these waters.
It is, and it's one of those things where you don't want to move, and I think Kentucky got caught to a spot here where you don't want to move and kind of spook somebody out. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, or somebody out of their letter of intent, like we were talking about the Ron Holland situation. But and you mentioned depth a moment ago. Let's say that it isn't Hunter. Let's say that Oscar is what they get back, and that's the guy that they have the best relationship or the relationship with of 2 years, and they try to get a third year out of it, or essentially 3.5 years because he was here before that. But let's say that he's back and Reeves is back. I don't have any concerns about depth when I look at the roster. I think the depth was kind of shored up when Ugo came back. I think that's where I kind of felt like, okay, you have some options now on the interior. You have elite rim protector. You've got Bradshaw, who we know wants to play the 4, could maybe slide and buy some minutes at the 5 if needed. If Lance is back, you have a body there that you can slide in and play. We've mentioned Adu on this show. If he's back, you've got a guy that can slide and play some spots. I don't really have any concerns about depth. I guess the only concern then would be, does Kentucky find itself in a spot where it needed a specialist at a role, maybe a stretch 4 that can do some things off the bounce and shoot the ball a little bit? I think that would be the kind of discussion that we'd be having. But when it comes to depth and bodies, I don't have any concerns about it because we know this is going to be a deep backcourt. Like, I forget to mention Reed Shepherd on some episodes just because I get so caught up talking about DJ and Rob and Justin and Reeves. But Reed's right there, a guy that could maybe find a role on this team. So I don't have many issues or concerns about depth overall if they get Oscar and Antonio back.
Yeah, and I do think that Reed is going to play a bigger part in this whole scenario than I anticipated. You know, I kind of thought from the beginning, knowing how good Reed was, and yeah, he's a McDonald's All-American, but I just kind of had this, there's no way he's going to be more than a 5-minute. I could kind of see him being the Adu Thero type of guy where he's going to be kind of a situational thing. He might get 10-ish minutes every once in a while, but really he's going to be stuck to last guy off the bench, maybe a couple minutes here and there. But, you know, I'd heard some pretty interesting buzz that, like, expectation is they are relatively high that Reed is going to be able to step in and make an impact pretty early. And I don't know if that means he's going to be a 25-minute guy, but like, I do think that he's going to have a role on this team. And I think it's going to be like in a 10 to 15-minute type of situation, which it's not that I didn't give him enough credit, but I just didn't expect the staff to be that confident for Reed to make that immediate of an impact, I guess is the best way to put it. But early, I mean, they haven't even arrived on campus yet. They haven't even graduated from high school yet, but there is a lot of optimism about what Reed is going to be, and sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I should clarify. Somebody mentioned, when did Ugonna become elite? I was talking about his rim protection. Like, I think that we know that that's where he's elite defensively. I mean, we saw that in a limited role this year. Like, he can affect the game with his length and his ability to block shots, and that's what I think that he would be for this team. I'm not expecting a polished, put together superstar out here, but when he plays, I do think that he can add some elite rim protection there that Kentucky hasn't had. So we'll see.
Yeah. So Hunter is the I think the big domino to kind of set everything else into place. I think that they, as of yesterday, had he committed yesterday, Kentucky was not expecting to get Hunter. I know there's some tweets about a silent commitment here, and I'm told, like, Kentucky, if and again, he's keeping a lot of this stuff close to vets. A lot of the information that comes has come from Hunter. His recruitment has come from the other schools, and basically like their feedback from how they think things have gone. So like a lot of this stuff did not come from Hunter directly. It came from what he conveyed to the coaching staffs on these visits with all these schools. So it's what Kansas is leaking, what Kentucky's leaking, what Maryland's leaking, what Villanova's leaking. So it's really tough to get a read because it's all like it's all weighted. Like it's all calculated with, like, I was told earlier on that the number that he was looking for with his recruitment was $900,000 to $1 million. Like, that was the kind of going rate for him that first EYBL session. And, talking to some other guys, they were like, well, that's just Kansas, trying to put the measuring stick out there because they know that they have $1 million lined up for him with NIL, and they want everybody to compete with that. And it was kind of like everybody competing with each other through back channels about NIL and, oh, well, this is what he's expecting. And then, hearing from Kentucky after the fact, they're like, he didn't come in and make any like NIL demands. Like, he didn't come in and say, we expect $1.5 million or we're walking. Like, yes, NIL was discussed, and he did talk about branding and how he'd be able to do that, and Kentucky's confident in its pitch. But, it's just funny how things are relayed and kind of how things are weighted by different schools to kind of send a message to the other schools that are competing for them.
Yeah, it is very interesting how those situations play and how things happen. And I know I've got all the comments and stuff pulled up here, and I know we're seeing a lot of questions about Kentucky's backcourt being full of youth. And if it is Antonio Reeves, him being the only really experienced guard coming back, but Jack, we've seen the experienced backcourt, not work out and stuff. Like we've seen that not play out in Kentucky's favor when it comes to NCAA tournament success. But I feel like the upside and potential of Kentucky's freshmen is kind of where this season goes. If they mature and progress, and the reason I like it is it's a high number of guys coming in, and not every one of them we know. Like I've said this multiple times, you're going to have your guys that rise, You're going to have your guys that drop, and you're going to have your guys that kind of are what we thought they were going to be, or maybe somewhere middle of the pack. With a high number of guys coming in, if you get 2 of those freshmen to kind of emerge into elite status by the end of the year, then I think Kentucky's put itself in a position to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And that's why John Calipari, early in his career, he always said, I'll take talent over experience. And we know that this is young talent. And if you add some veteran guys, I think my concern would be, does it take away from Kentucky's ceiling, where I want to see what these freshmen – I think that at first I was concerned about Kentucky being young, but as the spring has gone on, I think it's more so of a let's ride it out and let's see if these freshmen catch some of the younger days of John Calipari's tenure at Kentucky and kind of emerge into postseason stars.
Connor Riggs says, can you talk about the Iverson Classic and what you liked and disliked from the Kentucky guys? What did you think of the post game from Allen Iverson, him going up to Rob Dillingham and saying, like, you got some Allen Iverson to you? Like, I like the third person stuff from like a Hall of Fame NBA player. Like, you know what you look like to me? You look like Allen Iverson. Like,
yep.
From Allen
you
Iverson.
Know him,
yeah. But Allen Iverson, Rob Dillingham played very well. Got kind of the best and worst versions of him, and the excitement was there. He was, I think, named to like Mr. Crossover or something at the event. I don't know what that means, but that was the award that he won at the conclusion of it. But you could see them kind of, him and DJ developing some chemistry. They were going heads up against Justin Edwards, who finished with 20 points in a losing effort, but he was also the co-MVP alongside DJ Wagner. Aaron Bradshaw was invited but did not show up, and it was at their high school. So that was a little concerning on my end personally, but they announced it as an injury. But I thought it was weird. Why would you not even just show up to the event that was hosted there for you in your school? So I don't know. That's beside the point. But a very solid showing for all 3 future Wildcats.
Yeah, it felt normal, right, to see Kentucky guys kind of starring in all-star games throughout the spring, incoming freshmen. It felt normal to me. Like, it was good to see that. You know, they've had guys, they've had McDonald's All-Americans, but like, this recruiting class has had a lot more talk and hype around it in the last 5 months or so than maybe some of the ones prior to it the last few years, which we know that those classes didn't have great numbers coming in. They were lower number of classes. This is a big class Kentucky has coming in. So I thought it was encouraging to see them playing well. And we know that Rob is electric. We know that we've talked about Rob a lot on this show over the course of the last month, and you get the good and the bad with Rob, and his good is really good and his bad can be really bad at times, but it's exciting. And I think that he's going to deliver a lot of exciting moments in a Kentucky jersey a few months from now. And this entire class overall, like, I thought, Justin had a good spring. You've seen DJ doing his thing this spring. I thought all those guys have done well for themselves and kind of gotten Kentucky fans excited about what it could be.
Champ 21, who continues to say that it's a done deal. UK is getting Hunter Dickinson, which I appreciate your optimism. Kentucky doesn't feel that way, but I hope you know more than I do. That'd be great. He says, where does a 7-man rotation rank on the Cal era list? Dilly, Wagner, Reeves, Edwards, Bradshaw, Dickinson, Ugonna.
What was that again?
Dilly, Wagner, Reeves, Edwards, Bradshaw, Dickinson, Ugonna as your 7. Then I guess Reed and Adu would be your 8 and 9, and Lance is your 10.
I like it. I do. I like it. I like it because you've got, there we go. I can see it on the screen. I was trying to find it down here. I like that. I like that your options. I think you have guys that can slide and play some different roles, as I was saying, and moving around. Like if you have foul trouble on the interior, you've got depth there with Bradshaw and Ugonna. You've got depth in the backcourt, guys that can slide. And the thing with this backcourt is you've got multiple guys that can play with what? The ball in their hands. But you also have guys that can play off the ball. Like, I think there's a good balance there. Like, you can see Dillingham, you can see Wagner. We've seen Antonio Reeves get some experience last year with the ball in his hands and some middle ball screen. We also see Antonio working off the ball. I think that's important if you've got guys that can do it with the ball, without the ball, because then you're not pigeonholed into just one role. And then foul trouble doesn't kill you as much. Like, and I know there's been a ton of talk about can freshmen win it, and like can Kentucky's youth, and we saw. I mean, that team in 2012 with Anthony Davis, look what Anthony Davis is doing in the playoffs right now. I mean, the dude, when he's healthy, looks like the best player in the game. And it's really encouraging to see what he's doing. But we've seen it before. We saw Duke in 2015 do what they did down the stretch with a lot of youth and things. And look, we've tried the veteran experience roster for a bit, and it hasn't worked out. So don't hammer me for wanting to try what did work at one point. And I thought that Kentucky going youth has been better than Kentucky going a ton of experience in recent years. And talented youth, I think, is a start. And we know that this class doesn't rank up there with some of the best in college basketball. That's fine. All it has to do is it has to compete against what's in college basketball currently. And if this is the best of the best entering college basketball, Kentucky got it.
John Hand says, Tyler Perry update. Love the Medea movies are great, man. I'm a big fan. I think he does great work, and I love it to death. I think he's talking about Travis Perry.
Yeah, I heard he's a really good scorer too. Like,
yeah, he's super versatile, making Diary of a Mad Black Woman and dropping 45 points every game, taking over the all-time state scoring record, man. He's super versatile. That's why Kentucky wants him, actually.
I'm sure I'll be getting an up close look at Travis Perry here in a few weeks, so I'll be able to give a pretty good scattering report on Travis.
Duke and hoop, man.
Give me till mid-June though, when I'm sitting there actually maybe trying to figure out how to stop him. So we'll talk about it.
How cool is it? Did you see the update on the game that he's playing in December? I think December, about him playing at King Kelly Coleman's old gym. I think that is super cool. And I'm really glad that acknowledging the history behind it and just the magnitude of it and wanting to kind of commemorate that in that way. I think it's so cool, man. I'm very excited. I think that's actually the same date as the CBS Sports Classic. So I probably won't be able to physically be there.
Which is in Atlanta, right?
It is
this year. That's cool.
Different place. Different.
But no, I think that's a really cool thing that they're doing. And anytime you can add stuff to that, to high school basketball, especially in the state of Kentucky, and I think that Kentucky high school basketball is getting better and better and better, especially in central Kentucky and the northern part of the state. But I know coming from eastern Kentucky, and now I've made the move up here, like basketball in the state, like there's really talented players and guys that are, earning Division I offers and stuff. And I think that it's really cool to see them showcase and do creative things like that. That's like Bell County, where I'm from. They're playing a game in the old gym where Hoosiers was filmed this year. Yeah. Like anytime you can do cool stuff like that for your program and stuff, I think it's a really cool thing to do. So I think that's cool to see Travis getting to play in that environment. It's a really cool thing to see.
Unless any other questions come through, we're going to start wrapping up. But Kentucky reached out to Grant Nelson, the 7-footer from North Dakota State, 17.9 points, 9.3 rebounds, shot 52% from the field. Kind of the next big unicorn style of guy that everybody falls in love with. What do you think of Kentucky? That's a guy that has a lot of NBA interest. And I'd heard just personally that his first and top priority is to explore the pro route and really thoroughly evaluate the NBA. And it's kind of NBA first and everything else second. But throwing your hat in the ring for a guy that is clearly the most unique guy out there. Interesting link there.
Yeah, went straight to the top of, or near the top of the portal and where guys rank. And when you have a guy that does that, you want to see your program who has needs at positions kind of show interest. And Kentucky's shown interest. I've not got to watch tape on him. I have looked at his numbers. I've not had a chance in the last day or so. Been so hectic on my end to trying to get things in order, but I am wanting to sit down and watch some tape on him. But his numbers look really good, and there are a lot of schools there showing interest. But that's kind of the guy in the portal that it's kind of the unicorn, right? That does some different things and probably projects well as a pro when you look at some of the things that he does.
What do you think is the significance of them reaching out to him in particular? I think that is what interests me. The timing is very interesting because he's a 7-footer when Kentucky is actively recruiting one other 7-footer and trying to get back another 6'9", 255-pound center. It's a weird fit, very interesting fit, and it almost feels like he'd be a contingency plan, but also like, does that mean that they know or think they're not getting one person and like him maybe more than I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic.
Is it one of those that you're kind of just feeling it out, reading the room a little bit, maybe just kind of seeing, okay, just maybe gauging temperature? Is there interest here? Because is he going to be available by the time Kentucky's decision is made, whether it be Hunter Dickinson or Oscar Tshiebwe? Like if Hunter Dickinson goes elsewhere, has Oscar made a decision on his future yet? Like was that Kentucky just putting its name in the hat, maybe just reaching out, touching base, and finding to see if there is any interest there? When it comes to fit and things, I mean, when you look at numbers, I mean, the 3-point shooting is not like crazy good. Like it's not like it's a number that just pops off the page at you that you have to go and have to add it. But I do think that he is one of the better players to enter the portal. And if he plays college basketball next season, and he could certainly make an impact and adjust the rankings of where teams are slotted going into the season. But I am interested to see that, Kentucky's been picky when it comes to who they've reached out to and who they've targeted and made connections to. So like this offseason. So I do think that there is something to take from that. I'm just not sure what it is, if that makes sense, because I think Kentucky's so invested in Hunter Dickinson, Oscar Tshiebwe that I don't really know if there's room to add a third guy. But you've said it before. You don't want to be left standing there with nothing to show for. Is that why Kentucky did that? Does Kentucky know something that maybe we don't know?
Yeah, because when they reached out to Jamarion Sharp with WKU, that was a pure contingency plan for Ugo. Yeah. When they thought they were losing Ugo, they said, we just got to go get the best shot blocker in the portal.
Yeah,
that made sense. This is, I mean, the interest kind of coincides directly with Kentucky recruiting 2 other centers, one to return and one to come out of the portal. So it is interesting. And Ben from Kentucky mentioned that Kansas also is reaching out to Grant Nelson. So, maybe it's not Hunter related at all. It's interesting. Just tea leaves, just reading as many as possible to gather one big consensus on all this fun stuff. It's been a really interesting off season with just decisions and how things are going. Like with the NIL aspect being thrown into things and schools offering ridiculous money, and it's just created a very interesting dynamic of how Kentucky is recruiting and who they're recruiting, and just how the whole roster shakeups has just been very, very fascinating this offseason.
And I will say this is why it's important to have your class solidified before you get to spring. In the years that Kentucky's done that, when they get all their signees and stuff in the fall, in a bigger class, you're not sitting here in the portal having to search and find and hope and things like that. Like, I think we went into this offseason kind of knowing maybe 80 to 85% of what Kentucky basketball will look like in 23, 24. It was kind of the 5 position. With Oscar, now with Hunter Dickinson kind of burst onto the scene, and then your Antonio Reeves. I think even going into the end of the season, we kind of already maybe slid Antonio into a role at Kentucky with an extra year. So I think this has probably been, when it comes to there's not many spots available on this roster, and I think that's what's made it so hard to follow, is because we're like, okay, what does Kentucky do? Then Ugana's decision and his scenario was probably added some intrigue and some flair and stuff to the offseason that we probably didn't expect a few months ago. And things. It's been a weird one. Like, it's been one that's been really hard to kind of follow. But when you step back from it, it's not been one that's really concerned me, because I think Kentucky, majority of the roster has been solidified and in place. And now it's about getting, to me, that final piece. And I think it's been about the final piece for about 6 weeks. And it's just, which one is it?
Whew. Well, we'll wrap up with this, kind of tie these both together. Deoncy Live and Morgan Zaleski. Deoncy says, among the schools recruiting HD, who do you feel UK's greatest competition is? And then Morgan Zaleski says, as a Maryland fan, I still think no one knows. I think both of those things are very accurate and together. And like I said earlier, you're not getting anything from Hunter directly. Nothing that I've said on this show is straight from Hunter. It is what Hunter has conveyed to all of the other staffs involved, and also the confidence that the staffs involved are conveying to the general public and through back channels and leaking to certain, what they want out there and how they want out there. There's a reason that, when I say that Kansas is the most confident out of all of them, and they have put out there that they're willing to match any offer for Hunter Dickinson out there, there's a reason for it. I mean, that's very calculated. That's a very calculated thing to say. Well, it doesn't matter what anybody else is offering because we're going to offer more. Ha ha ha. That's a PR. That's a PR thing. They are confident. And talking on Kentucky's side, they were not expecting to land him yesterday. And then when I reached out about today, because there was some buzz about him potentially announcing today, they're like, first I've heard of it. I've, don't know on my end. I think Kentucky is they're not in the game right now. I think they're not trying to dive into the tea leaves and go, well, where is he? I think they're you know what? We gave our pitch. He either likes us or don't. He went on his podcast, and in the 37 minutes of hot garbage, he did present some pretty interesting stuff about Kentucky and the visit and what he liked about it. And we talked about the strength and conditioning stuff and the player development. There was a lot to like about the visit. Facilities were not great, but and that was conveyed through Mom more than anything. But there was a lot to like about Kentucky, and I think Kentucky is done with the trying to get to the bottom of this. They're like, you know what? We're not going to play into the drama. We're not going to try to put stuff out there to build suspense or hype. I think they're just like, you know what? He either comes or he doesn't. And if he doesn't come, we are going to go all in on Oscar Tshiebwe and see if he's going to come back. And if Oscar doesn't come back, then we're going to go either find the best center in the portal or get Grant Nelson or go all in with Ugo and add another 4. I think they are done with the drama, and they're going to just kind of take this one step at a time. And I think that's probably the best way to handle a really tricky situation.
It is. And I guess that's the scenario that I've not allowed myself to even entertain at this point is what does Kentucky do if it doesn't get Hunter and if Oscar doesn't come back? That's the one that I've not even really played out because I don't know. Do they add someone late? Or do they roll with what they got? Does the interior Bradshaw, Ugonna, Lance? I don't know.
That'd be a tricky one.
It would be a tricky one. You better be really, really good at guard and hope that one of those guys kind of catches some stardom there on the interior with extended minutes. Because I do think that they have 2 young pieces on the interior in Ugonna and Bradshaw that have higher upside than what Oscar Tshiebwe has. Oscar Tshiebwe is really good at his role, but I think the other 2 actually have a lot more upside and project better as professional basketball players than what Oscar does. And we know that Oscar's pro stock is what it is. It's actually lower than what it was and probably doesn't climb at all with another year at Kentucky. The benefit at Kentucky another year is he makes money that he can't make as a professional basketball player in 23, 24. There's a lot of interesting kind of storylines and narratives around all these decisions with where Kentucky is right now. And I hope that we can maybe officially talk about this roster here in about 2 to 3 weeks. That's my hope. Because right now it's a lot of dancing around. I think we've given people some good stuff on the show. We've talked about the roster in depth and pieces, but I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating because we want to know what it looks like. You think John Calipari wants to know what it looks like? Absolutely. Because he wants to get the ball rolling and kind of be like, okay, where are we and what are we going to be?
Well, somebody that I'm very confident in to be on my roster personally is myperfectfranchise.net and Andy Ludicky, a franchise consulting company that helps others find franchises that would fit their needs, skill sets, investment requirements, and time commitment constraints. You might have seen Andy's name on KSR before as he sponsors some of our recruiting coverage. Andy is super nice, great to chat with, and we are very excited to continue our partnership. Andy is an experienced entrepreneur, and he has been helping others go through the same process that changed his life 10 plus years ago. If you're wanting to find a way out of corporate America or a way to diversify, please reach out to Andy as he's got a ton of knowledge in this world. And best of all, his services are 100% free to you as always. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Sean, I'm hoping that next time we talk, And I'm hoping that the talk of a like random announcement today, I doubt it, but like I'm hoping that we get some like random announcement and we have to jump back on here in an hour and a half and talk about it. That'd be fantastic because it means we don't have to talk about Hunter Dickinson anymore and listen to another Marty Mush podcast. Like that'd be fantastic. I'd really love that opportunity. So I'm hoping the next time we talk is no matter what the news is, it's closure on a very close to vest recruitment that it's like oddly refreshing how close to vest it is, but it's also like, all right, let's get this thing wrapped up and figure out what's next. And hopefully the next time we talk that will be the case.
Yeah, hopefully. And shouldn't be in a car. I'm glad to be sitting in a place, in a chair with a microphone and lighting and my phone not 95 degrees on the dashboard. Like that's good. You're not next to
Dying in the middle of the show.
Yeah. Like it's good. And yeah, we'll got some good episodes coming here in May. Like I think that we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about over the course of the next month and then into June, and honestly expecting a busy summer, especially with Kentucky playing.
Yeah, we'll be following along the entire way. We're having a blast with it. Appreciate all of our listeners. Again, the feedback was crazy, and we appreciate all the comments and just conversation that has been going on in the show. I appreciate each and every one of our listeners. Sean, let's get out of here. Where can fans find your work?
You can find my work at gobigbluecountry.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GBBCountry.
Find me on Twitter at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Reach out to me via email, jpilgrim@KentuckySportsRadio.com. With that, we'll be back next time for their Jam Packed Sources Say podcast. We will see you then.